My mother-in-law spat the cruelest words I had ever heard in my life, and she thought I would just sit there and take it. "Call your peasant mother," she sneered, her lips curled into a smile dripping with superiority. "Let her come from the village. She can be my cleaning lady." The room fell silent. My husband froze, and my blood ran cold. It was in that moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with a difficult woman. I was staring down someone who believed she owned me, my family, and even my dignity. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't going to let her get away with it. And by the time I was done, she would regret underestimating me more than anything else in her life. Before I tell you exactly how it all unraveled, don't forget to subscribe for more stories just like this one, because trust me, you won't want to miss the ending. I should start from the beginning. My name is Alina, I'm 27, and when I married my husband Victor, I thought I had finally stepped into the life I always dreamed of. He was kind, ambitious, and for the first few months of our marriage, he made me feel like I was the most important person in his world. But very soon I realized that I wasn't marrying just him. I was marrying his mother as well. From the very start, she inserted herself into every aspect of our lives. She controlled how the house was arranged, what food was cooked, even how much of Victor's salary was saved versus spent. At first, I thought she was just being protective, maybe a little overbearing, but soon it became clear that she wasn't protecting anyone. She was ruling. The problem with people like her is that they don't see boundaries, and they certainly don't see other people's feelings as equal to their own. She made it obvious that she didn't think I was good enough for her precious son. In her eyes, I was a simple girl from a simple family, the daughter of a mother who raised me alone in a small village after my father passed away. My mother worked day and night to give me an education, to put food on the table, to keep a roof over our heads. To me, she is the strongest and most respectable woman in the world. But to my mother-in-law, she was nothing but a target for her cruel tongue. It started with small comments. At our wedding reception, she whispered loudly enough for me to hear, "At least Victor will be the one improving her bloodline." I remember clenching my fists under the table, swallowing my pride because I didn't want to ruin the day. Later, when we moved into the house Victor had inherited from his father, she walked through each room as if it belonged to her and said, "I'll need to approve how you decorate. We don't want it to look like some village shack." Victor, as always, tried to smooth things over, telling me not to take her too seriously, that she had good intentions. But I could see it in his eyes. He was afraid of her disapproval too. The more I tried to fit in, the more she pushed me down. If I cooked, she criticized the flavor. If I cleaned, she ran her finger along a shelf and smirked when she found dust. Nothing I did was ever enough. And when my mother visited one weekend to see how I was settling in, my mother-in-law made her sit in the corner like an unwelcome guest, speaking over her, ignoring her attempts at conversation. That night I cried into my pillow, ashamed that the woman who had sacrificed so much for me had been treated like she was invisible. But the breaking point came on a Sunday afternoon, after one of our endless family lunches. My mother-in-law had been sipping wine and complaining about everything from the neighbor's dog to the government, and somehow the conversation turned toward my mother again. She looked me straight in the eye with that smug expression and said the words that are burned into my memory forever. "Zvoni svoi kokaznitsimamash, pust prishades derevni. Budet moi aborshchitsi. Call your peasant mother. Let her come from the village. She can be my cleaning lady." The fork slipped from my hand and clattered onto the plate. My husband's eyes darted between us, his face pale, but he didn't say a word. He didn't defend me, he didn't defend my mother. He just sat there, paralyzed. My chest tightened with rage, and I felt hot tears welling in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall in front of her. She wanted me broken, humiliated, silent. But instead, I pressed my lips into a thin line, stood up from the table, and walked out. I could hear her laughing behind me, saying something about oversensitive village girls. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every cruel word she had ever said, every moment she had tried to belittle me or my mother. Something inside me hardened. If she thought she could trample on me, on the woman who raised me, on the love and pride I carried for my family, she was about to learn a lesson she would never forget. She thought I was powerless, but she had no idea what I was capable of when pushed to the edge. And as I lay there, the beginnings of a plan started to form, one that would turn her arrogance against her and make her choke on the very poison she had spat at us. I don't think I've ever sat through a dinner where the tension was so thick you could slice it with the butter knife in front of me. My husband, Sergei, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly desperate to avoid conflict, while my mother-in-law, Lydia Ivanovna, kept smiling that thin, poisonous smile of hers, like she was already victorious in some twisted battle I hadn't even realized I was fighting. Her earlier words still echoed in my head, calling my mother a peasant woman and suggesting she come clean her house as if we were nothing more than dirt beneath her polished shoes. I had learned early on that speaking back to Lydia only fanned the flames, but something inside me snapped that evening. Maybe it was the way she dismissed me with a wave of her hand when I tried to change the subject, or maybe it was the smug look she gave her son when he tried to speak on my behalf and she silenced him with nothing more than a raised eyebrow. Whatever it was, I knew I couldn't let her trample over me anymore. So I said, forcing a smile as I set down my fork, "You think my mother belongs in your kitchen with a mop in her hands, do you?" Lydia leaned back, swirling her wine, her red nails clicking against the glass. "It's not an insult, dear. Work is work." And considering her rural background, she'd probably feel quite at home scrubbing floors. After all, not everyone is cut out for sophistication. Sergei closed his eyes, muttered something under his breath, and pinched the bridge of his nose. He hated confrontation, and I knew he was silently begging me to drop it. But I couldn't. Not this time. "My mother raised me single-handedly," I said firmly, "while your precious son was being spoon-fed caviar. She may not have pearls around her neck or French perfume in her drawer, but she has dignity. Something money can't buy." The morning after that soiree, I expected a storm. I braced myself for the inevitable phone call, the cutting remark, the dramatic outburst from Lydia about how I had embarrassed her in front of her entire social circle. But instead, there was silence. A silence so heavy it felt ominous, like the calm before a hurricane. Sergei went off to work as usual, kissing my forehead and telling me not to worry about his mother. But I knew better. Lydia was not the kind of woman who forgave or forgot. She was the kind of woman who plotted. Sure enough, 3 days later, the blow came. Sergei returned from work pale and tense, his tie askew, his eyes filled with frustration. "She's done it," he muttered as he sank onto the couch. "What?" I asked, dread already clawing at my chest. "My mother went to the board. She's trying to block me from getting the promotion I've been working toward for the last 2 years. She told them I'm distracted, unfocused, that marriage has made me weak. And she's whispering that maybe someone else, someone more dedicated, should take my place." The air seemed to leave the room. This wasn't just petty family drama anymore. This was her reaching into Sergei's career, undermining him where it hurt most. I felt a wave of guilt crash over me. "She's doing this because of me," I whispered. Sergei shook his head firmly. "No. She's doing this because that's who she is." She was looking for an excuse. But we can't let her win. That night, I lay awake long after Sergei fell asleep. My mind was racing, thoughts churning like storm clouds. Lydia had all the weapons: money, influence, reputation. If I fought her on her terms, I would lose. But maybe I didn't have to fight on her terms at all. Maybe I could flip the script, turn her own pride into the trap that would destroy her. The idea came to me the next day while I was shopping for groceries. I overheard 2 women gossiping in the produce aisle, talking about Lydia's party and how refreshing it had been to hear someone speak honestly for once. "That young wife of Sergei's," one of them said, "she's got spirit. She reminds me of myself before I married into this cage." And that was when it clicked. People were already watching. People were already comparing us. Lydia had built her life on appearances, on keeping control over how others perceived her. But if I could show people the cracks in her perfect image, if I could reveal the cruelty beneath the pearls and perfume, she would collapse under the weight of her own hypocrisy. So I started small. Subtle. I began hosting my own gatherings, not nearly as lavish as hers, but warm, genuine, filled with laughter and authenticity. I invited some of the same guests who frequented her soirees, and slowly, they began to see the contrast. Where her parties were stiff and suffocating, mine were vibrant and alive. Where she was cold and calculating, I was approachable and real. The whispers began almost immediately. Have you noticed how different she is from Lydia? Honestly, I prefer spending time at her house. There's something about her energy. It's contagious. And every whisper was a knife to Lydia's carefully crafted reputation. Of course she noticed. And when she finally confronted me, her mask slipped completely. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed one afternoon when she cornered me in her sunroom, her voice sharp as broken glass. Inviting my friends into your shabby little home, serving them homemade food like some country bumpkin, trying to win their affection with your authenticity. I met her gaze steadily. It seems to be working. Her face twisted with fury. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. And I will make sure Sergei sees that before it's too late. But for the first time, her threats didn't scare me. Because deep down, I knew I had something she didn't. Something she couldn't buy or fake. People trusted me. They believed me. And if push came to shove, they would take my side over hers. The final blow came at yet another one of her grand events. This one was bigger than usual, an anniversary celebration for her marriage to Sergei's late father, a man I'd only ever heard about in stories. The guest list was massive, the decorations extravagant, the atmosphere dripping with opulence. Lydia was in her element, basking in the glow of admiration, acting every bit the queen of her domain. But then she overplayed her hand. Midway through dinner, in front of dozens of witnesses, she turned to me with a smile that was anything but kind. Tell me, dear, how is your mother? Still tilling the fields, or has she finally learned how to hold a mop? The room went dead silent. Every fork froze, every glass stopped halfway to the lips. The cruelty of her words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and undeniable. I could have cried. I could have stormed out. But instead I smiled. Calm, steady, unshaken. My mother, I said clearly, my voice ringing through the hall, is the reason I stand here today with my head held high. She may not own pearls or palaces, but she taught me integrity, resilience, and kindness, values I see lacking in certain others. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Lydia's smile faltered. And then I added the twist of the knife. In fact, it was her example that inspired me to start the community foundation I've been building. Some of you already know about it. We've been raising funds to help struggling families in the city. And I would be honored if those of you who share my values would join me in this mission. The applause was thunderous. People rose from their seats, clapping, cheering, even pledging donations on the spot. Sergei's hand found mine under the table, squeezing with pride and awe. And Lydia? She sat frozen, her face pale, her power crumbling before her very eyes. That was the night the tide turned completely. But what I didn't realize yet was that she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She was wounded, humiliated, cornered, and that made her dangerous. Because when a queen feels her crown slipping, she doesn't go quietly. She claws. She bites. She burns everything down around her. And I was standing directly in her path. The weeks after that anniversary dinner felt like living in two worlds at once. On one side, doors were opening for me everywhere I turned. Guests from Lydia's soiree reached out with words of support, offers of collaboration, and generous donations to the foundation I had announced. What started as a small initiative inspired by my mother's resilience was quickly turning into something much bigger than me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just surviving in Lydia's shadow. I was building something of my own, something that couldn't be taken away with one cruel remark. But on the other side, I could feel her presence circling me like a predator. Lydia's silence was never truly silent. It was the kind of quiet that hums with tension, the kind of stillness that tells you a storm is coming. I noticed it in the way Sergei grew more withdrawn each evening after work, his brow furrowed, his phone buzzing with messages he didn't want to read. I saw it in the way her usual allies, family friends, colleagues, distant cousins, suddenly grew cold, their smiles tight, their voices clipped when they spoke to me. She's spreading lies, Sergey admitted one night, slamming his phone onto the kitchen counter. She's telling people you're manipulative, that you're using the foundation to make yourself look like a saint. She's even implying you're spending the donations on yourself. The words cut deep, but they didn't surprise me. If she couldn't beat me with insults to my face, she would try to poison me behind my back. But lies had a way of unraveling when the truth stood firm, and I was determined not to let her sabotage what I had built. So I doubled down. Every penny of the donations was accounted for, every project documented with photos, receipts, and testimonials. I invited journalists to see the work firsthand, children clutching new school supplies, families eating warm meals, women learning skills that would help them earn a living. For every lie Lydia whispered, I had 10 pieces of evidence shining light on the truth. And people noticed. Still, I knew her. I knew this wasn't enough for her. Lydia wasn't the kind of woman who lost gracefully. She would fight until the very last breath, and the more desperate she became, the more reckless her attacks would turn. The breaking point came one chilly evening when Sergey and I were invited to a charity gala hosted by one of his company's partners. I didn't know it at the time, but Lydia had orchestrated the entire event, her last-ditch effort to destroy me publicly. She was there, of course, draped in diamonds, her smile sharp and gleaming. For the first hour, everything seemed normal. Polite conversation, champagne glasses clinking, polite laughter drifting through the hall. But then the speeches began, and she took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice smooth and commanding, I would like to address something that has been on many of your minds. My son's wife has been very busy recently, parading around with her so-called foundation, claiming to represent dignity and charity. But what many of you don't know is that behind the scenes, things are not as they seem. A hush fell over the room. Sergey stiffened beside me, his hand tightening around mine. She has been using her connection to this family name, Lydia continued, her eyes sweeping the crowd, to secure donations under false pretenses. Money meant for the needy is lining her pockets instead. And while she plays the role of the humble village girl who rose to grace, the truth is far more sinister. She is an opportunist, a manipulator. And I, as her mother-in-law, can no longer stay silent. Gasps rippled through the room. All eyes turned to me. For a split second, my throat closed, panic clawing at my chest. This was her plan all along. Corner me in front of everyone. Smear my name so thoroughly that even if I denied it, the stain would linger. But I wasn't that naive, trembling girl she had mocked at her dinner table weeks ago. I had been preparing for this moment. I rose slowly, deliberately, and walked to the stage. Sergey tried to follow, but I shook my head. This was my battle. Taking the microphone from Lydia's hand, I turned to face the crowd. My voice was steady, though my heart was pounding. I'm glad Lydia has shared her concerns, I began, because transparency is exactly what I stand for. And if any of you doubt my words, I invite you to see the truth for yourselves. I pulled a folder from my bag, a thick, meticulously organized file of documents I had prepared for exactly this scenario. Bank statements, receipts, reports, photographs of every project we had completed, every family we had helped. I held it high for all to see. These are the records of every cent that has gone into the foundation. Nothing hidden. Nothing stolen. If anyone here wishes, you may review them tonight. And if that's not enough, the journalists who have been covering our work can speak to the results firsthand. The tension in the room shifted. People leaned forward, whispering, eyes widening as they realized what was happening. But more than that, I continued, locking eyes with Lydia. This is not about money. This is about dignity. About respect. From the very first day I met Lydia, she has made it her mission to belittle me, to remind me that I come from a village, that my mother was not rich, not glamorous, not worthy. She thought she could shame me into silence. But what she doesn't understand is that I am not ashamed. My mother raised me with honesty and hard work, values far greater than diamonds or pearls. And I will never apologize for that. The applause started slowly, a few claps here and there, but then it swelled into a roar. People stood, cheering, calling out my name. Sergey came to my side, his arm around me, his pride shining brighter than anything else in that room. And Lydia? For the first time since I had known her, she looked small. Truly small. Her face drained of color, her lips pressed into a thin line as the reality sank in. She had tried to ruin me, but instead, she had exposed herself, her cruelty, her arrogance, her desperation, for all to see. In the days that followed, everything changed. Her influence in Sergei's company began to crumble, her allies distancing themselves to avoid being dragged down with her. The board reinstated Sergei's promotion, citing his integrity and resilience in the face of family pressure. And me? My foundation grew faster than I could have imagined, donations pouring in from people who said they had been moved not just by my cause, but by my courage. Lydia retreated into silence. She still existed, of course, lurking on the edges of our lives, but her power was broken, and though I knew she would never truly accept me, it didn't matter anymore. I didn't need her approval, because in the end, I had something she would never have, respect earned, not demanded. And when I thought about my mother, the woman she had once called a peasant, I smiled. Because without her, I would never have had the strength to stand tall, to fight back, to win. That was my crown. And no one, not even Lydia Ivanovna, could take it from me.